So, and welcome to another episode of Rebel City Podcast. Episode 91.
91. I definitely think that's right this time.
Aye, getting close to the 100, mate. I mean, we were planning on doing something for the 100th episode, but I mean, it's looking very, very unlikely that we're going to be able to do anything other than just talk.
It's definitely took a turn for the worse again this week. We did have a couple of decent ideas for maybe going and doing something live, but it doesn't look like any of that's going to be realistic between now and us getting to episode 100. So maybe be that we, roll it out once there's an actual opportunity to do so down the line, because I think the ideas that we had were still pretty solid. So,
absolutely.
You know what I mean? We can work with them down the line, even if it wasn't for the, 100th episode, so to speak.
Aye, man. We could maybe even do something on Zoom with like pals or something. I don't know. Get a bevy.
Aye.
Ruin the 100th episode.
I just like we're in a huff because we didn't get to do what we wanted to do, so we're just going to tank this one.
There's a couple of podcasts that have done stuff like that. Like one of the American ones, they took magic mushrooms. I think it was our 200th episode, but they just ruined it. Like,
I bet you they had a smashing time to be fair. You know what I mean? Like, I can't imagine it'd be a lot of fun to like watch or listen to.
No, I think at least one of them freaked out as well. I mean, this is hard enough. Even doing this stoned can be a bit like, fuck, maybe I shouldn't have got this stoned before I come on. I've definitely done that a couple of times.
That's a familiar sentence in many, many aspects of life, isn't it? Like, I really shouldn't have been this stoned when I tried to do this. I don't really necessarily want to talk about lockdown straight away, because it seems like all we've done. I mean, I've got to be honest with you, having been furloughed and still, we'll not see it because we're doing audio only this week, but seeing the streaky was behind me, I'm in the middle of decorating, I've been doing gardening, and it feels like I've inhabited like a personal level of hell, where the last 6 months has literally just been decorating and gardening, and you might as well have just thrown in that I had to watch Rangers beat Celtic once a day for 6 months, and I would have literally been in hell, you know what I mean? Like, so I'm a wee bit kind of like, fuck it, I'm over it. I know there's been a lot of folk that have come out and come back in, but I think we'll get to it. Like, I think in terms of like stuff to talk about, man, like, I think that the idiots have like finally won, and that's been the biggest part of this. Is like the last 2 or 3 weeks have just been fucking chocked full of absolute like throbbers, just taking up my internet feeds everywhere I look. How masks control you and blah blah, and you're like, okay, Dave for Sheffield, yes, Bill Gates is entirely interested in controlling and monitoring your life, even though you walk about with a smartphone that like advertises you to anybody that wants to buy your data 24/7 anyway. Like, it's just we've descended into like, the worst aspects of what we feared when guys like Trump and Johnson came to power, was that this connection with reality would bleed out, and like it has in a massive, massive way. And, being cooked up and feeling anxious and all these other things that come with the current situation definitely are playing a part, but like people have went just off the fucking deep end, man. Like, it's getting absolutely silly. So
absolutely, man. I mean, I've got people, no naming any names, but we've spoke conspiracy on this podcast a couple of times. I'm getting a pure weird echo, see, because I can hear the room as well as like hear the mic. It's like weird. I've got used to like AirPods, and see, because I've put the cans back on, it's like, I don't know, it's like another dimension I'm in, like, what would you say, audibly? What fucking word that is. But we've spoke conspiracy a couple of times, and I think there's a couple of people who've picked up on that on my Facebook feed. I don't think I've had anybody like purposefully add me because we've spoke conspiracy, but there's definitely like a couple of people that have noticed that we're talking these things, and I get sent stuff all the time. Like, on a bi-daily basis, I'll get sent something from somebody that's like, what do you make of this? And it's like, the other week I got sent Tucker Carlson, where it was like somebody for the World Health Organization was doing a speech where they said that coronavirus has become about the reordering of society, and that you get through this we need to make changes, and they were talking about things like locking down and blah blah blah. And Tucker Carlson's basically like, well, look, this is what this has been about all along. And I'm like, right, no, that's his take on it. Like, what's your take on it? Did you go and did you listen to the full speech? Do you know what the context was that this wee clip came out of that they've put onto Fox News, and then somebody's then projected their opinion? Well, look, this is what it's been about all along. It's like, well, not necessarily. I think that, what the fuck was that?
That was the lamp for behind the couch falling on top. Fucking freaky that the minute we start talking conspiracies, like the lamp falls on my head, like it's the wee fucking voice in the Alexa box is like pure quick. Do something to distract them.
Like pure sending electrical fucking signals through your lamp to fall on your head. So it like just asking that sort of basic level of like question on it, where it was just like, did you listen to the full speech? No. What do you think about it? I don't really give a fuck what Tucker Carlson thinks about it, because we already know he's a cunt. Like, but are you a cunt? Like, are you interpreting it in this sort of weird way where you're like, they're trying to control us? Like,
the people don't even get that they're already under control, because the people that go to these anti-mask protests, for example, like, there's no square inch of tarmac between their house and whatever it is they're joining these protests that isn't covered on CCTV. Like, there's, they're tagging themselves in every opportunity, everywhere they go. Like, they're literally throwing a roadmap to like their day-to-day life up on the internet as it is anyway. Like, how much more control do they really think that they're actually ceding by like putting a paper mask on when they're in a shop?
Aye, absolutely. I mean, I think we'll talk a wee bit later about the Social Dilemma. I don't know if you've watched it, the Netflix documentary Social Dilemma.
I did.
I think we'll talk a wee bit about that later, because
I've got terrifying.
And I think it sort of feeds into what we're talking about, people's sort of ignorance, because like you've just said, people are literally feeding a roadmap that's been like actually turned into a product and sold for big money, and they do not give two fucks about that. In fact, they're getting it. Well, we'll talk about this later. That they're getting it to their fucking wains, like they're pure here, pacifying their wains with it, and then they're worried about being told to wear a mask to protect other people. It's just, it doesn't make sense. But the one that gets me with it, the whole like, this is so that the governments of the world can now give, or like can now put draconian measures on their people, and this is about controlling the planet, one world government. So basically that conspiracy is expecting like the Russians, the Chinese, the Americans, the British, the French, every single country on the planet to be on the same wavelength. Like, we can't look at what's been going on with Brexit. We can't get a cabinet on the same fucking wavelength, and that conspiracy theory is thinking that somehow every politician, every doctor, every scientist on the planet is part of this weird thing that so that you can't go out to the pub with your mates. Is it that, right? Is it that complex, or is it simply that we're living through a deadly virus? They don't really know how to control it. They need to find a vaccine. Until they find a vaccine, there's nothing that they can do about it by the looks of it. This is, anytime they try and open up a wee bit, the R rating's going to go up. They're trying to find a balance. Basically, they're trying to find a balance with this. But some of the stuff, like, guys no want to wear masks in Tesco or whatever, like, these same people need to waive the right to put a fucking scarf over their face when it snows in winter then, because some of the bullshit, like, that people are coming away with about, like, oh, it increases CO2 levels and, like, it's dangerous, and it's no, like, it just isn't. Stop with your fucking nonsense.
This is one of the ones I think I've seen a few people touch on it recently. Stuart Braithwaite for Mogwai, I'm pretty sure, is he was talking about it at one point, how everybody had become an expert because they watched an hour's worth of YouTube videos, and I think as well I commented over the weekend in a post with Vonnie Leclerc where there are very similar things. She was talking about I think the last had been like in some sort of home show, renovation show previously, and was talking about how couldn't do lockdown because of X, Y, and Z, and you're like, oh shit, sorry, you're a virologist and an economist now. Like, I think that's been the most sort of frustrating aspect for me in the last couple of weeks, is this like bleeding out of like faux knowledge that people seem so determined, because it meets the criteria for their outlook in life, rather than making their outlook in life about observing what is actually just correct. You know what I mean? Like, so I mean, there is a lot of like armchair, virologists out there now, and I'm just like, simmer the fuck down.
It's
like,
actually like showing quite a lot of people out for their vulnerability, that we almost get this sort of thing about infallibility, where all the people can do no wrong, especially like when it comes to celebrities. It's almost like they project perfectionism, so therefore they get judged by perfectionism. But this like thing that you're talking about that's happening, where people are coming out and spouting all sorts of mad shit, thinking that they know what they're talking about, it's showing a lot of them up for just being normal people that are just paranoid. They're just like, this lockdown has done something really strange.
Have more respect for the likes of Ian Brown, Noel Gallagher, and women after property shows and stuff like that. If they'd just been like, this is a really weird situation, and I still don't know how I feel about it. Like, I don't know how I'm processing it. But like, what we're actually getting is the irrational fears of people coming to the surface and them reacting to just like nonsense that's designed to actually fuck with them. You know what I mean? Like, and actively spreading. I've seen, as you say, a few people who I'm not going to name on both various aspects of my social media, both on Rebel City and on my own personal account, where I interact with them at different levels and on different topics, where I'm like, wow, man, like, I actually thought that you were sane, and like, some of the stuff is so out there and so even so a character for a lot of the people you're interacting with, that it's actually quite jarring, and that's what's getting to me the most, is that this is no longer the small mental space that's taken up by guys like Trump and Boris Johnson talking shit. It's not even now bled out as far as their supporters who blindly follow, Brexit like extremists and so on. It's now out there in the general public, almost like idiocy has become a pandemic during this pandemic. It's actually now starting to infect people who I would normally expect to have a wee bit more sense, and it is, as you say, at least in part, an emotional reaction that I think we probably need to get grips with, because I don't think we're doing ourselves any favours losing our shit at every tiny bit of misinformation and nonsense that gets thrown in front of us.
I agree, man.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's because really that it impacts every single person. This is why we're starting to see this kind of sort of like idiocy like coming out, is just because I'm as impacted as you, but that's not really the case with a lot of subjects. So people can have this sort of like objective opinion about stuff and sit back. Even something like Brexit, where you can sort of sit back and be objective about it in sort of some way. For this, we can't be like that. So people are actually like really, I think people are just scared. And this is how they're dealing with it. They're dealing with it by rejecting it. It's almost like, I can't deal with this. Like, if you're actually sitting down thinking about the idea that we're all under threat, and we could be like right now, even you go out into the street at the shops, like people have got like sort of parameters of comfort that exist, and it's like, well, your local Tesco, so you feel really comfortable going there. When you go to different places, it's slightly less comfortable, but it's within a sort of parameter that you can deal with mentally. But this virus seems to be something that people just can't sort of fathom. So it's either, well, it's bullshit then, because I can't even imagine that this is happening. If you were to go back to like a year ago, 9 months ago, it would be impossible to imagine that this was going on. So I think people have just dealt with it by sort of dealing with their fear by just rejecting it, and rejecting it in any sort of way, whatever way that they want to do it. Like, I've been getting up at 5 in the morning. It was something that I was wanting to talk about, actually, just is about like going through changes, and like I've noticed something by like making a big change to like my routine. So I've had like the sort of COVID routine for the last 6 months, something like that, where it's been kind of steady. But as like lockdown has been lifted bit by bit, we get the gyms back. I'm trying to make sort of like common sense decisions on how I can use like the shit that I want to use, but no put myself in sort of harm's way. So I've been getting up at 5 to go to the gym. Sometimes I come back and go back to my bed. But this has been something that I've been doing for like 20 days or what, for however long, 3 weeks I think the gyms have been open, so like coming on like 21 days. And I was just wanting to talk about how tough that change was and how much like I pure struggled for the first like 7 to 10 days, where I was like a fucking baby. Like I was so difficult even just to like live with. Like for Sean, it's been so tough, like having to deal with me because I'm like tired all the time and I'm busy. I'm like really busy. So I've got like this combination. But after about 10, 12 days, I just noticed that it just got so easy. I was like, wow, I'm actually feeling good doing this. And it was like a pure stark reminder to myself that no matter what the change is, like small, like getting out your bed a couple of hours earlier, you need to really be aware of how that impacts your mood, and you don't take that out on other people, because it was really like difficult to deal with.
No. That's probably at the other end of the spectrum to what we're talking about here. If there's a spectrum of like how you react to change, like yours is probably more at that, a fairly positive end of the spectrum, and what we're talking about in other people is probably at quite, a negative end of the spectrum. And like, I don't want to like be too harsh on people, because the stuff that is out there making people uneasy in terms of these, the folk that say do your research, and you're like, but I like do actual research, but you know what I mean, like,
aye,
and like that type of mindset, it does, as you say, it comes from that place of fear, and like you got to empathise with it to an extent, even though I don't agree with it, and I think we should be actively looking to combat it. Is that if you're that person sitting in the house thinking to yourself, genuinely thinking to yourself, the government are basically trying to take over full control of my life, and I don't want to send my way to school because of X, and I don't want to go to this because of Y. Like, that is an absolutely horrific mind space to be living in if that's genuinely where you are. Like, so, this is something that's, people are doing it themselves to an extent, but it's also partially something that has been done to them too.
absolutely. And we'll talk about that in 2 seconds. What I was wanting to say is that I've been going to the gym at 5 in the morning, and so I'll not say about gym because I'm about to shit talk somebody that's a personal trainer in that gym. One of the guys was way.
How much for me? You know what to say what gym it is?
Aye, whatever. What's it? I mean, really, what's the worst that's going to happen? For fuck's sake, maybe I get banned for the gym, which would suck. But one of the guys' personal trainers was way like what looked to me like a sort of middle-aged woman, so a woman in like maybe in her 50s, late 40s, early 50s, and I was on the machine next to them, and I'm a fucking nosy bastard, and I pure listen to conversations. Like, I enjoy just sitting listening into other people's conversations just to see if it's anything interesting, and then I'll like check out if it's not anything interesting. But this dude's like talking about how the virus is bullshit. No, we should have never closed the gyms, and so I'm like, right, I'm going to listen to what his rationale is here. And he started getting conspiracy theories mixed up. So he was going like, "Have you heard of QAnon?" And she was like, "No." So this woman's literally just going, "Aye, all right, okay, aye." She's not even like encouraging.
She's trying to stretch.
What's that?
She's just trying to stretch.
Aye, exactly. Aye, she's trying to squat or whatever, and he's like going on about how it's bullshit. So he's like, "Aye, QAnon. If you heard of QAnon," and he's like, "It's about how that's a conspiracy about how like the government of the world's trying to control us through coronavirus." And I'm pure like, don't correct the guy, because then I'll just be like, it's all bullshit, by the way. But what you've just said is like fundamentally nonsense. And now you're like, so this guy, the bit that was really like, he started producing Facebook memes about percentages of people that are dying and stuff like that. And the bit that really got me was he said to her, "See if there's stuff that you're not supposed to know, I know it." Okay. And I was like, right, so this guy, this is the sort, I think genuinely now, I've got a level of empathy and compassion for the guy, and we're going to talk about that in 2 seconds. But this guy, the way he said it, and obviously like, I've got like hundreds of hours of like counselling and therapy under my belt. I can kind of get a read on like tone and what people are like. This guy believed what he said. It was the way that he said it. I was like, wow, this guy. So this is the level, I think, of delusion that we're getting involved in. That people are like, the information that I'm getting through my social media feed that has been absolutely curated for them, and this is going to lead to like the next sort of point as we talk about the Netflix documentary. Like, they believe that that is the truth. That's the gospel. So we're moving into almost like sort of like a weird way that people believe that their social media feed is like the Bible to them. Like this is the truth. And I think that when I thought about it, like I was actually initially like quite annoyed because I was thinking she's prime because she's middle aged. So that's the prime sort of age that are getting sucked into this bullshit.
Yeah.
He doesn't know what conspiracy theories he's talking about when he's talking about conspiracy theories. He's using memes as evidence to like back up his argument.
It's a sound argument.
And then he came away with this like pure one-line delusional statement of like, see the things that everybody's not supposed to know. I think one of the most troubling aspects of like what we're talking about is that every single person is getting fed slightly different. Like this is, I suppose, like where I went with the compassion when watching the Social Dilemma, like the Netflix documentary about what's going on. We already kind of know that, almost in like denial, but this like really confirms that it's deliberate, because I think the social media companies have been very good at going, this is like an adverse effect to something that we've just done. Like but then you've got guys that are coming out going, no, like they researched the fuck out of this. But the scary thing is that like depending on what you engage with on a day-to-day basis on your social media, depends on what information you're actually getting sent. It's like completely different. And not only that, it's addictive. They're making it addictive. Like they're pushing you more of what you think me. So if that guy, right, so that guy's a personal trainer in the gym. This is where my thought process went. He's a personal trainer in the gym, and so his livelihood has been threatened by this virus. He's just spent 6 months off, and he's petrified that he's going to go back into lockdown. That's the chat this week. So this guy's doing everything in his power, probably subconsciously, to engage with shit that tells him that this isn't real, that he shouldn't believe it, that it's bullshit, that it's a pack of lies. And every time he engages with that, the fucking social media platforms push merit towards him, merit. So it does feel like he's getting, because he actually is getting pure curated data in a way that he loves and engages, and that's scary, man. Like,
I think the biggest aspect for me is that when we started talking about this type of like echo chamber that you can sometimes get with your social media, I always considered it to be something that we constructed ourselves by following and unfollowing or friending and unfriending various people at different times. And obviously the content they pushed to us were the biggest indicator of what we were going to think of, what we were going to feel within that sort of peer group. But I think having watched the documentary and a few other bits and bobs in similar areas, you know, these guys it started with Gmail, and they were like, I used to be addicted to my Gmail because that notification gave me validation. That I was busy, I was successful, I was working, and so on and so forth. And all the things that this were behind, the psychological elements that were behind this notification, they were like, well, let's take that and apply it to every other aspect of social media. And the comparison they used was like a slot machine. Every time you look at your phone, it's you pulling the lever on that slot machine, and every time you get the validation and notification, it's like getting 3 sevens up or whatever. And it became clear to me then that the actual echo chambers that I thought we constructed and had to be wary of were actually being constructed for us. Exactly how you've described, is that when you engage with content, it's pushing you more of it, knows to push you more of that content. It's basing it on how long you look at pictures, how long you watch videos on average, and it's tailoring the content to what you will engage with so that they can then attach advertising revenue to you looking at their screen. And like, that was quite scary for me, because we've explicitly discussed being in and out the echo chamber, and we've both discussed different approaches to it, where I just don't really engage with stuff that I don't enjoy watching or having as part of my social media experience, whereas you've been a wee bit more open at times to actually allow some of that negativity in. And really the actual answer is that none of those two approaches fucking matter a jot, because they're going to push to you whatever the algorithm tells them to push to you anyway. So as well, that empathy for other people on the other side of this definitely needs to come in, and it's partially what I mean by this is something that is also being done to people rather than just people doing it to themselves. But I'd like to see us now, with this type of information out there, start to critically think again, because I think that's something that has had less and less of a weight put on it as the years have passed, especially in the era of guys like Trump and Johnson and so on, like, is to actually like analyse where the information's coming from. Is somebody trying to make an argument to you with a Facebook meme, or is somebody trying to make an argument to you by sending you a link to like a New York Times article that's been like 2-point verified journalism? You know what I mean? Like, we now need to start like separating the shit and nonsense for what we need to know, because we're at a stage now where it is a kind of life and death issue. Like, Trump's there talking this week about how, over 200,000 Americans have died. That he was saying it would have been a result had it been 20, yet he's now opening up massive indoor and outdoor rallies ahead of his re-election that are just going to be hotbeds for infection. And the people that go to these are going based on the information that their favourite YouTubers gain them, or their favourite Facebook feeds gain them. And that's where we now need people to start going, well, hold on a minute, is that accurate? Is that fair? Is that in my best interests? And I think we've definitely stopped doing that on a mass scale.
Aye, man. I mean, that 100%. I think the amount of irresponsible shit that's going on. I mean, this is where I'm kind of coming to it. Like, I've been in a conspiracy rabbit hole before, and I think that COVID really sort of broke that back for me. Like, as far as like going too deep into them. See, when it became like life or death, that's the point at which I was like, I'm going to check out a listening to like random YouTube videos on this stuff. Like, see, as soon as Joe Rogan starts talking about COVID-19, I turn it off. I don't want to hear it. Like, he's not an expert. Like, see, when it comes, this is where I've came to with this. Like, I love a conspiracy theory, but see, like, imagining the conspiracy that went behind the killing of JFK, imagining like Nazis going to South America, imagining 9/11 conspiracies, that's all well and good, and there's a bit of fun in there, and that's what I go for. But see, as soon as it became like today, life or death, like people's kids, people's moths, taking a chance with that on a conspiracy, no thank you. Like, I'll default to the experts. Like, I'm as distrustful of this Tory government as anybody.
Absolutely.
But to think that the Scottish government, the Tory government, just like I said at the sort of top of the show, the French, the German, the Chinese, the Russians, all the enemies against the Middle Eastern, Israel, they're all on the same page, is just wild to think that.
Yeah.
And it just, I'm defaulting to the epidemiologists, the doctors, and that's where I'm at with it. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think that's where the common sense should be.
I think that's why it's become such a like toxic thing for people, is because there has been a prolonged period of time ahead of this where things like conspiracy theories and whatnot were pitched as entertainment. You know what I mean? Like 2 days ago, I was sitting watching The Ancient Aliens. Now, this is a show that basically presupposes that all ancient civilization was founded after some like connection to alien contact, including things like Jesus and like the Temple Mount in Jerusalem and everything. It's bonkers. And like, I find it entertaining because there is an element into which you're like, let's see how much a reach this is for you to justify this. And they've made like 3.5 seasons of the thing. Like, same with your Finding Hitlers and all these other ones where it's a form of entertainment. So it's been easy for people to make the mistake that what they watch on YouTube is credible, or what they see, because it mirrors so much mainstream content that's out there in similar fields. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. We need to introduce some of these like Twitter style warnings or whatever it is, where stuff's fact checked or whatever over a certain amount of viewers. I don't know what the answer is, but there needs to be some way of actually saying to people, like, without patronising them, because a lot of what has put these people off is that they feel patronised by the society. So why will they be in any way inclined to believe what a government they believe is corrupt, or a society they believe is against them, is going to say? You know what I mean? Like, we need to actually find the way to, as much as I'm saying to people, there has been an idiot pandemic, like, I'm saying that almost half in jest, you know what I mean? Like, we need to find a way to get beyond that disdain and actually to a point where we can reach people and say, no man, look, that's no real, and like, here is why what you're propagating is really unhelpful. You know what I mean?
It's a difficult one at the same time, because no matter what, like, some people will never be happy. Like, I would suggest that, or I think that the last sort of week or so that Nicola Sturgeon has done an absolute immense job as First Minister. I think it's been outstanding.
Aye.
She's even got like Piers Morgan praising her on like Good Morning Britain, and
Yep, she had steady, consistent leadership throughout. Like,
yeah, and the message
she's been a rock
yesterday,
star.
I think like what everybody was saying was inspiring, like what she was saying in Parliament, but there is still an element that are just not happy. That just
Yeah.
it's still, oh no, she's terrible. Like, I mean, George Galloway's got a petition open to get her to resign.
George Galloway, really?
Aye, know what I mean?
Like,
how about we get a petition together to get him like Anglified? Give him England. Like, we don't want you. You're no
Aye,
Scottish
never.
anymore, mate. Fuck off. I mean, he's got to be the worst Celtic fan that's ever existed. That guy, man.
Yeah, believes in the freedom and sovereignty of Palestine and Ireland, but no his own country. But again, that's a matter for him. You know what I mean? Like,
That's a political choice.
The
Do you know what
people
I mean?
of Scotland are going to rise up in one almighty wave behind a George Galloway petition. Like, that's the type of like delusion that I can allow. Like, that's less dangerous. That's funny delusion that we can sit and laugh at. You know what I mean? Like, I'm all for that. It's the dangerous ones we need to nip in the bud, and he's in no way, shape or form dangerous, you know what I mean? I'm assuming he must have like, you know, advertised the website for the petition on the front of like a bloody, what would you call it? Like a jumpsuit. I mean, like,
Aye.
obviously the Brexit shambles has just been unreal. That the Tories would win a 90-seat majority with a oven-ready deal, and then within sort of 6 months, essentially try and torpedo their own deal just to get a no-deal Brexit through. Like, I don't think it in any other way as like election fraud to like have your central pledge of this Brexit deal to then go into Parliament and have 330 of your MPs vote against a bill that they'd already passed.
Right. It's completely disconnected for Brexit. You're going to need to like.
They're basically trying to torpedo their own withdrawal agreement by legislating against the Irish backstop. So my understanding of this backstop is that as part of the Good Friday Agreement, the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland essentially became a border in name only. It's literally just a line on a map.
It's no like a customs border.
Aye. So as part of the Republicans needing to agree to Good Friday was that checkpoints and such went and disappeared. So I think as it stands at the minute, the Northern Irish sort of Republic of Ireland border, which I'm sure people will be annoyed that me referring to as that, apologies, but for the purpose of this conversation, it's just a line on a map. It's not actually like a meaningful border. Like, Ireland is Ireland in all but name, essentially.
Okay.
But obviously, as the UK leaves, Northern Ireland leaves with the UK. So that fictional border has to become a real border. And that real border invalidates clauses in the Good Friday Agreement, which, if it disappears into thin air, could result in a return to violence in Ireland. Okay, so I'm sure it's more complicated than that, but that's the basic gist of what I get for it.
Right, okay.
Obviously, they don't want Northern Ireland to have a hard border, and they, for whatever reason, don't think that they should have to, even though they are leaving the union that negates that border. And they've tried to basically get a bill through Parliament that negates the sort of Irish border clauses of the withdrawal agreement, which basically torpedoes the entire agreement and then essentially leads to a no-deal Brexit, because the EU are not going to withdraw the request for this Irish backstop, as it's being called, but the Tories are having absolutely none of it. So although they passed the withdrawal agreement with whatever they had in the last Parliament, they have now went back with a majority and rescinded the bill that they themselves passed, 6 months ago.
Okay. Is this how they're breaking the law?
So that's how they're breaking the law. So going against the Good Friday Agreement, for what I understand, will be a breach of international law. It's also going to have the knock-on effect of absolutely ruining any trade deal. So the big sort of silver lining they've been hoping for as they step away from Brexit, Europe as part of Brexit, was that they'd get this pure all bells and whistles trade deal with America. And Trump's commitment, aye, cool, that'll happen, blah, blah, blah. Obama said you go to the back of the queue. which is exactly what's going to happen because the trade deal needs to be ratified by Congress. Congress is overwhelmingly, well, it's majority Democrat at the moment, and the Democrats have massive Irish immigrant in the party and in the population of their party.
Okay.
So
we're fucked.
Congress will never agree to a trade deal with the UK that invalidates the Good Friday Agreement. So we're in like a bit of a kind of Mexican standoff at the minute where
We who?
we're going to lose. Well, with the EU, with Ireland, with America, with Tories, like they're
just
all basically
completely
kind of
isolated
pointing
ourselves.
fingers at each other. It's all us that have done this. But we are pointing the fingers at everybody else while everybody else points the fingers at us. And it's 100% us on this.
Wow.
So they're using, all the nonsense and noise and furore that's going on about things just now to essentially try and get their no-deal Brexit and, line the pockets of their Russian backers.
Fuck.
Allegedly.
Aye.
Allegedly. So that's been pretty weird to see. Like, the only time somebody in, the British government's been honest about Brexit was when the dude stood up in the Commons and went, aye, like, we're going to break the law. But then he used this ridiculous term in a very specific, and whatever it was, in a very specific way or something like that. It was he was basically in the Commons going, aye, we're going to break the law. So they've had resignations for, like, senior legal representatives, like the Lord Advocate for Scotland resigned. So everybody with any principle that legislates as part of the Westminster machine has like stepped down and out of the way and went, I'm having fucking nothing to do with this. The people that are left are the ones that are already flexible enough in their morality and their outlook to put it through anyway. So it's likely to pass and go through and do all the damage that it was intended to do.
Oh, for fuck's sake, man. I mean, Scottish independence is just becoming an inevitability.
In a lot of respects, I certainly hope so. It'd be interesting to see what happens with the Section 30 thing, given that obviously the Lord Advocate of Scotland just resigned. So I don't know how that's going to affect the question as to whether or not we need Westminster's permission to have an election. I know obviously the Scottish Parliament said they're going to legislate to allow them to hold referenda. But I think, for what I understand, this court case is working its way through the UK High Courts about whether or not we need Westminster's permission is going to be pretty vital. But I don't know where we are with that. Like, we did reach out to a couple of the people on that in the hope that somebody would want to come on and talk with us. But again, the legalities and stuff are so sensitive at the minute that it'll be something that probably happens, after a judgment's made. If we can obviously make it happen at that point. So Scottish independence, like in theory, there's absolutely no surprise while we're going for like 50 to 55%. It's going to keep going up the longer this goes on, and the more that Brexit bites and hits in alongside the COVID. Like, I mean, what the number's going to be in 6 months' time is anybody's guess, but I would guess that it's going to keep going up. I get that, polls seem to suggest that the Unionists were taking a lot of comfort for the fact that polls suggest that an independence referendum is not a priority right now. And, that's because the priority is a global pandemic. Like,
as soon as that's over and done with, we'll be straight
like
back on it.
Scotland in the Union poll that appeared in the Scotsman, it couldn't be more like one-sided. And at the same time, it was a very sort of common sense result. It's like, yeah, we all want independence, but right now the referendum is not the priority.
They're manipulating the wording of how they feed that information by going like, it's not a priority right now for people. Like, no shit.
And we had Keir Starmer up here telling us that the other day when one of the flying visits for London. Boris Johnson, the last time we spoke, it was Keir Starmer this time. Again, telling us what we're supposed to think, which, seems to have worked really well for the Labour Party in the last 10 years, so I can understand why they would continue to send people up here to patronise us, you know what I mean?
Do they, really? I mean, they don't,
not really.
They don't need it. Like, it's no requirement, so why bother? But, I mean, it's like sort of token gestures that we get after the Labour Party. What was really worrying for me is that we're heading... We've got two things that could be happening. There's chat that fucking Boris is going to retire after he delivers his no-deal Brexit. I mean, it's sort of mission accomplished, I think, and
Oh, aye.
he'll be using.
I'm surprised that people are surprised by that notion, like, because, you know, I think it was fairly clear that the minute Brexit was done and he'd, you know, covered whatever donations he's taken to this point for, you know, whoever in Russia and so on, that he would just fuck off. He would just disappear to some, you know,
Wherever David Cameron and Tony Blair live.
some estate or some like Caribbean island or something, you know what I mean? Where
exactly.
they'll be fed like a regular supply,
I mean,
like, you know, Caribbean virgins or whatever he needs, you know what I mean? Like,
who's the front runner, like, for the leader of the Conservatives?
so they're saying Gove, which would be horrific. But then again, did they know? Did they not pass a law after Gordon Brown saying Scots couldn't be Prime Minister? I'm not sure, but I think obviously Colin Gove a Scot is quite a... Well, they've got the evil laws and stuff like that, English votes, English laws. I'm pretty sure it's like some offshoot, but again, it might not have passed, but I know there was definitely talk of restricting Scottish ability to be Prime Minister. I don't know if it ever get through though. I need to Google that before people start tweeting us. I'm not sure that Gove really counts as, you know, a particular... as a Scotsman, really. You know what I mean? Like, I think if you asked him, he'd probably say he was an Englishman, you know what I mean?
He's
Like,
fucking right.
He certainly wants to be.
Definitely. But that's a scary prospect, man. Fucking...
Any of them at this point are scary. I mean, they're all just caretakers for whoever is running the donation pools. You know what I mean? Like, that's why they're chopping and changing them, because who's actually there doesn't really matter. May went in and achieved a Snoopers charter and fucked off. You know, Johnson's went in and achieved his Brexit. They're all going in to achieve whatever their single issue is and get back out as quickly as possible before they have to carry the can for anything. And Gove will be the same. Gove will go in, you know, do whatever Cummings tells him for 18 months, achieve whatever one thing he wanted to achieve, and then get out and take up his position on the board of X amount of directors of companies. You know what I mean? Like, it's now... You know,
standard
copy
practice.
and paste. I like copy and paste moves. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't think it'll be any different. I don't think any of them really want to be there any length of time. That in 4 or 5 years' time they're still on carrying the can for the shit show that Brexit's going to be.
Aye, absolutely. You know what I mean? Like, we had a prime example with the revolving door the other week with Tom Watson, where Tom Watson, the ex-deputy leader of the Labour Party's out trying to talk about restrictions on betting websites, and then goes and takes a seat at the board of Bet365. So
no way, really?
Aye, their parent company. So while he's, I mean, it seemed that he said all the right things when he's there, but what's really happening? Like, is that what he's saying in public, whereas they're voting for other things through Parliament or whatever? But like you're saying, that's just the revolving door that's been happening since Thatcher. I think, like, they've been going and taking their paydays. I mean, they pay like 250 grand for Tony Blair to go and talk and like fucking like as a peace envoy.
I know.
That guy, do you know what I mean? Like, that's no wonder people are in conspiracy theories when like that type of shit's going on. I think this is where like the actual mainstream politics actually feeds the conspiracy community and actually feeds a level of delusion, is because they live in their own delusional world. Do you know what I mean?
They also want to be able to point to people and go, look at these crackpots. That's never what we would do. I mean, like, they also, you know, all this conspiracy nonsense and, you know, whatever else, anti-this, anti-mask, anti-5G, anti-such and such, like, it all provides a level of cover to a certain extent, because they can point at the extreme position and be like, well, you know, yours is, look at, you know, we're not that crazy, you know what I mean? Like, but they do poke and prod in a lot of respects when it comes to that type of thing.
Aye, absolutely. Keir Starmer was out getting it. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but I'm pretty sure it sounded to me like he was saying, make Britain great again. With his fucking shit the other day.
Aye, the conference chat. Probably important to know, I did send out a tweet going, like, Britain first rhetoric can get in the fucking bin. And, like, to be fair, Lisa Nandy didn't explicitly say Britain first, but she said everything except Britain first. You know what I mean? Like, and then you're watching slogans on, you know, union flags getting passed about. And I don't really know that the best way to resolve the issues we have just now is to be more patriotic, because if it was, then, you know, we'd be in much better shape. Like, there's a lot of people here who, it's, you know, practically the cornerstone of their personality. Like, I don't get the political strategy that says, fuck all of the technical things that they're doing wrong that we can actually go and dig them out on. Let's just ignore all of that and let's talk about patriotism instead.
I think it's maybe because it failed under Corbyn. Like it was like almost the last one of the rational choices where he's like presenting. I mean, like, for all his shortcomings, like he did make some bad decisions, but he presented a manifesto that was like costed and was radical in a modern sense. Like, do you know what I mean? And it got rejected. Yeah. So I think the Labour Party, this is another thing that we've been speaking about in multiple episodes. They're trying to make themselves electable, but I think the cynical side of me is like, they're too late. That was a trend that's been bled dry by Brexit and been bled dry by Trump, and now it's got people going, wait a minute, and rejecting that for perhaps what's going to be maybe the guy that's the Chancellor, which will just be somebody that's, I think, will probably just come out and say, well, this is what I'm going to do. And it's like, I think it's an example that the Labour Party are just a step behind every single step of the way. Same with the Democrats in America. They just feel like that step off of what the actual current pulse is. It's like last week to them, and I think this sort of patriotic shout out is just something to try and get them elected.
Aye, they're trying. I think the purpose it was to win back the sort of red wall on the north, as it was referred to, that obviously overwhelmingly voted in favour of Brexit. But I think that to go in the biggest financial crisis since the 1930s, that at the moment looks like it's only going to get deeper, to go and talk to people who are going to be the most affected by these changes and be like, let's all wave a flag. Mm-hmm. It does not appeal to me in any way, shape or form whatsoever. And again, it's that patronisation of the electorate that we talk about when guys like Johnson and Starmer come up here and like wave at us for like a pre-organised event, take any questions and then tell us what we should think, and then that's them for another 6 months until they need to come back up when they get their next bad headline in Scotland. You know what I mean? Well,
I suppose once we find a way not to patronise the conspiracy theories, we can tell the politicians how not to patronise us, can't we?
I like, how could we just talk to people like adults? You could do it by just talking to them like adults. Like,
absolutely.
It's not a hard one.
This was something that I had been saying to Sean, that like the last few days, like obviously Sean's really impacted by things like lockdown as like a dance teacher and working in schools and stuff like that. That the thing that they need to do is they need to tell us why they're doing what they're doing. They can't just do shit.
What effect they're looking for.
Exactly. And I think that if we go back to what Nicola Sturgeon's performance yesterday, that's exactly what she did. It was like, here's what's happening, here's what we need to do, here's what we think will happen, let's hope that that's what happens. It's like you said, it's speaking to people like adults, and I think that's why she's getting plaudits like both sides of the border.
Which in itself was a fairly sad indictment that we're praising, we're like, oh my god, this politician spoke to me like I was not an absolute nugget. Like, they're amazing, and like it is amazing to a certain degree, but like we should expect better on the whole, I think. Absolutely. To be honest with you,
she did announce almost like the first steps of basic income, with whatever was it, 500 quid they're going to pay if you need to isolate for 14 days. There's going to be like a financial support package. And that's setting a precedent, really. Like, if they lock down again, then people will be
I think Robertson was saying in the Commons today that Westminster either needs to extend the furlough programme or evolve the mechanisms that will allow Scotland to make that decision for themselves. So they are putting whatever pressure they can on to make sure people are supported. Again, given the situation we're in Westminster, who knows if it's going to meaningfully have any effect. I'm still on the furlough. If I'm not in a position to work, I hope it's extended. Doesn't allow for me to have a lot of disposable income, but it's allowed for me to cover my bills and not have to worry too much about that. So, I mean, it has been useful, but the notion that we're going to increase restrictions while removing support seems absolutely ridiculous, and I can only hope that, given how weak and how many U-turns this government's already had to make on this type of thing, that they'll make another one, as and when is needed, because what we're talking, like 60,000 people, I think just in and around Glasgow. That's a lot of people to just cut off their support for. And that's just in one small instance. You know what I mean? So if it's multiplied across, it's going to be millions of people that find themselves locked up in the house and not able to go to various other places as a result of restrictions, and also have no money whatsoever. It seems like it would be a crazy decision to make to me. But again,
absolutely.
That's not the first crazy decision they've made either. You know what I mean?
I mean, we'll see how many people actually stick to these restrictions. I mean, if you were to go to your Twitter feed, I'm pretty sure that it would seem like there's quite a lot of people that are just like, nah, I'm not fucking doing it. But just keep yourself right.
Fines are the way. Imagine being in a position where you've lost your job, and you're out and about trying to find the money, get a job, etc., and you happen to be on the wrong side of a rule, you get hit with a 10 grand ticket. I mean, that's again, I don't see where the logic in that is. You know what I mean? But again, time will tell. Who knows? We're only at the start of these new restrictions, and it'll probably be a few weeks before we can get to any real grips with how successful or not they've been.
Aye, absolutely.
I was going to talk briefly about this thing that I've watched, and I don't know if it ties in with what we've talked about or no. Have you ever heard of Nexium? So it's NVIXVM. It's like a pure funky spelling. They're basically
like churches. Like the band churches with a V for a U.
Aye, kind of like that. Nexium or something they're called, and they're basically it's almost like Scientology light. It was a thing I watched on the last couple of weeks called The Vow, and it was the Hollywood sex cult that the lassies for Smallville got involved in.
Right.
I don't know if you've ever heard this. So Alison, the wee blonde lassie, she was like...
She went to jail, didn't she?
She was really heavily involved in it, and the other brunette lassie kind of seems to have went in and went, oh, no, get the fuck out.
Okay.
But that was pretty disturbing. Seeing how, and it's weird how in the beginnings it actually looked like self-help. I recognise it for some of the guys that we've talked to in terms of peer-to-peer, and folk that we know who have went on to do mental health seminars and all these other things where in the beginning it looks, and maybe it does kind of mirror where conspiracies have moved recently, I don't know, but it kind of mirrors self-help and improvement for a period of time. You start to work your way up through the levels and get your sashes almost your judo belts and stuff like that with stripes for the more skill you get, and the more skill you get, the more people you then help, and it kind of cascades down almost pyramid scheme like. They're obviously making money after people facilitating these things the whole time. And I was 2 episodes in where I was I'm not seeing this. This is, it's a bit creepy, and the guy who runs it is a bit charismatic and everything, but I'm still not seeing where the big crime here is, you know what I mean? And then the guy started branding women for sex, and you're this went for 0 to 60 in fucking no time, where they split the men and the women of the community into 2 separate, almost mini cults, where the guys were supposed to be protectors and worked out how they could, philanthropy and all these other things. And the women's group was called DOS, which was basically dominant over submissive or something like that. And they were basically indoctrinating women as masters and slaves, taking blackmail off them, nudes and videos they recorded with the slag after. It was all called collateral. And the final aspect to this was they would brand the woman with this, DOS sign, but when you looked at it the other way around, one way it gave the initials of the dude who was the leader of the cult, and if you looked at it another way, it gave the initials of the blonde lassie Alison McAfee Smallville, and they were literally branding their names on women, calorie counting with them and all the rest of it, and they just took total control,
restricting food and
so they were having to text message their master and being can I have 70 calories? Can I have 100 calories every time they wanted to eat? And they would get a text message back saying aye or no.
Whoa. Okay.
Whoever it was. And it was all about this guy basically wanting to have sex with skinny women. And you're I think at the start he had 3 girlfriends. And you're dude, I mean, how much more really do you want that you've got to actually like heed, fuck, and brand people into having sex with you when you're probably quite charismatic to the point where you could have easily bed most of these women anyway, you would imagine. Not that that's justification for it, but it always seemed like a weird one to me where you were just like, why? I don't know why you would want like 50 women to be completely submissive to your will. I don't understand it, but it's something we see over and over again in these cults. Like you know,
that's what I was going to say. Like every single cult, it's almost like just goes back to the guy that runs it wanting to shag women, want to take
like,
wife.
aye,
Do you know what I mean? You're like, what the fuck, man? Like,
aye.
but I
I've
think
got one wife, and I'm a bit like, I mean, like 15 or whatever. Like, absolutely not.
I
Like,
think that
crazy.
there's a lot of like misogyny in it. There's a lot of sort of patriarchy. It's like a sort of miniature patriarchal thing where it's about power and dominance and they're just mentally damaged people. Like ultimately, I think a lot of them are like narcissistic personalities that just they'll never ever be satisfied. See, like you're saying, like I've got enough with one. Like they men like that need constant attention, constant stimulation, and the only way really to get it is because they kind of get it for one woman. So then they go to two, three, and then I think people just get sucked in. Like women like that, Alison Mack, just get sucked into this whirlwind that's always like.
Aye.
I mean, you always see that with like even the serial killer stuff. There's always one that really dominates what's going on, what's happening, and then one that just kind of gets sucked into it and just gets taken along. And it's just easy to manipulate, and they're almost like the testing ground for like the rest of them. And every time they get a new one, they get better and better at like adding women onto like this cult. Do you know what I mean? It's crazy.
This guy showed a video as part of this where this guy Keith, his name's fucking Keith.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Can you imagine meeting like the Messiah? Like somebody's like, "Pure, this is the way, this is the light," and like, "Pure, like you to meet Keith." You'd be like, "Keith, fucking hell!" Like he's not the Messiah. You know what I mean? Like, but so she meets this guy Keith. It started out with he ran like a weekly volleyball game.
Right.
And they were all like pure happy, clappy, like positive energy playing volleyball, and she came along to it. And this was the hook. And like he talks to her on camera for like 5 minutes, this lassie for Smallville. And like, see within 5 minutes, like literally within 5 minutes, she's a bubbling mess of tears and has had like a life epiphany sitting on the sidelines of a volleyball match. And this is where she came in, because she actually came into it quite late. So she wasn't like one of the instigators, but when it went dark, she was like his bottom bitch. She was the one that was like, you know, keeping everybody else in check. And it was almost as if it was like her that was doing it, but it was actually her that was doing it for him, if you follow me.
Right, okay.
It was insane to watch how quickly somebody with that type of charisma can like flip somebody. You know what I mean?
Darren Brown, isn't it? There's an
she
element
walked in as a stranger and walked back out as like a devotee in minutes. It was wild. I would highly recommend anybody that has interest in that type of thing to watch it, because it's frightening.
That's the type of like. I think I've heard Darren Brown talk quite a bit about how he takes his responsibility of being as skilled as he is very, very seriously, because it's so easy for him to just manipulate people into doing his will. And I think that guys like that will have that level of, whether or not they've trained consciously like Darren Brown has, or whether they've just developed the skill just naturally, because they all, when you find out what it is that's happening, it all is very natural, like the cues and stuff like that they use. But that's just somebody that's just highly skilled at manipulating people, and clearly that Alison Mack's probably thought, this guy's unbelievable, like look what's just happened to me, I've actually experienced that, no realising that it's just
that she'd had like a genuine so she took on this whole new energy, which was just weird. Like that was a pretty good one. I've been kind of like keeping an eye on. It's been week by week. On the flip side, it's somebody without the charisma that I also really enjoyed was what's it called? I'll leave in the dark. I'm alone in the dark or something. It's basically like a kind of 6-part documentary about a the Golden State Killer guy was a rapist in the 60s and 70s, like raped like 50 women in San Diego, and then moved south into California and like killed 12 couples. And he was one of these kind of almost like Zodiac style figures, where he was interacting with the press, goading them and stuff like that.
Right, okay.
But the woman who was investigating this like cold case was basically like a podcaster. So she started her own, like, she was one of the very first like true crime podcasters,
Right.
and built up a following for her blog that was getting like 10,000 views and so on and so forth. But she also happened to be Peyton Oswald's wife. So see the wee comedian fella that's been in like, does the voice of the unicorn and Happy, and he's been in like Marvel stuff and all the rest of it as well. He's been in loads of stuff. Like, he's a really, you'll probably know his voice before you actually recognise his face.
What's his name?
Peyton Oswald. So they were obviously know together as this all started.
Yeah, aye.
Got married.
Aye, I know who you're talking about. He's in
His wife's
like 2.5
Michelle, I think.
Men and all that fucking shit.
He's been in various. He's one of the guys who pops up in loads of shit. Like, he's actually pretty good at what he does, to be fair to him. So she is now, as part of her like blogging and podcasting, investigating this cold case murder rapist sort of thing. And it's about how she just slowly like slides into obsession, and there's a fair bit of tragedy, like personal tragedy involved, and it's like really beautifully handled and stuff like that. But as we were talking about the guy Keith, you know, the sex messiah Keith, being this charismatic person and who used that to dominate, this guy was very much the opposite. He was going to people's homes and like hog tying husbands while he raped wives and stuff like that. Like, his dominance was like very, very physical. And as this story progresses, she successfully kind of pieces this together, and her work is the basis for how they eventually like catch him, sort of thing. Like, the story, I'm not want to ruin too much yet, and anybody who knows Peyton Oswald's story will know what happens with, you know, his wife and stuff like that. But it is really beautifully handled, and like, obviously her work continues on beyond her and stuff like that, and everybody that had been part of this community that she had popped up round about her podcast and round about her blog actually like sort of completes her work for her. And, you know, you've seen the reaction when they get the phone call saying like, we got the guy. It was like 45, 50 years later they got him, and like, they're all this team of people that's come running together getting to celebrate catching this bastard was absolutely brilliant. So I think if I was recommending stuff to keep an eye out on, and you're into a bit of your true crime again, like The Vow and I'll Leave in the Dark, I'm pretty sure it's called. It was what he said to victims in his early days, is I'll be gone in the dark. That's it.
I'll be gone in the dark.
I'll be gone in the dark. It's very like interesting, but there are bits that are really brutal. You know what I mean?
Awesome, dude. I'll be sure to check that out. I've just finished The Sopranos, and I just love it, man. I was gutted again when it finished. I know obviously the people are like about the ending, but I was just pure.
It's an absolute masterpiece. So it's like, I've been more light and fluffy again. I've just been in about The Good Place and various other like cheesy shite that just occupies me. Thankfully, I've had plenty of reading today the last couple of weeks. You know, we had the Scabby Queen author Kirsten in this last week. That was just. It was a mind-blowingly good book, so it was like I couldn't recommend it enough.
I just finished that during the week there as well.
Aye, just is absolutely stunning. I've just taken delivery of our next book, who will be talking to in the coming weeks, which we'll keep under our hat for now, just for a wee bit, just to make sure it all goes ahead and happens. Don't want to advertise this one and then, you know, not get it out of the line. But so I've been enjoying making time to read again, because that was something that as lockdown progressed, I was like, I'd love to get back into doing a wee bit merry. So some of the books we've had on recently have been a really good excuse to, you know, dust off that part of what I wanted to do. And the one that we're going to be talking to over the next couple of weeks, I'm literally coming off this phone call and starting it.
Awesome,
so I'm really excited to actually like get into it.